There's a number in your head right now, a number you believe you deserve to earn. You didn't choose it. And if you've ever wondered why no matter how hard you work, how many promotions you get, or how much you save, you always seem to end up with roughly the same amount of money, you've felt the invisible hand of your wealth thermostat. In the next 50 minutes, you'll understand exactly why you make the financial decisions you do, why you unconsciously sabotage windfalls, why raises feel temporary, why abundance feels dangerous. And more importantly, you'll learn how to finally reset that internal thermostat to a temperature that serves your actual potential. But first, I need to tell you about a 7-year-old girl sitting at a kitchen table, about to learn a lesson that would control her finances for the next 40 years. Whether you're fully focused right now, or simply letting this play in the background while you work, rest, or drift to sleep, your subconscious mind is listening. The gentle frequencies woven into this audio are designed to quietly reprogram your relationship with money and abundance. So there's no need to concentrate. Just relax. Let the words and frequencies do their work. Your mind will absorb what it needs. Sarah was 7 years old when her mother sat her down at their small kitchen table. The bills were spread out like playing cards, and her mother's face carried that familiar weight of worry. "Money doesn't grow on trees," her mother said, pointing to the stack of envelopes. "We have to be careful. We're not the kind of people who have extra." That moment lasted maybe 30 seconds. But in those 30 seconds, Sarah's brain was performing one of its most important functions, learning the rules of survival. And the rule she learned was simple. People like us don't have money. Safety comes from having just enough. Wanting more is dangerous. 40 years later, Dr. Sarah Chen is a successful surgeon earning over $400,000 a year. She drives a 10-year-old Honda Civic. She clips coupons. She feels guilty buying coffee that costs more than $2. And despite her substantial income, she has less than $20,000 in savings. Sarah's wealth thermostat was set at that kitchen table when she was 7. And like a thermostat in your home, it's been working perfectly ever since, maintaining the exact financial temperature her young mind decided was safe. This is not a story about willpower. It's not about financial literacy. It's about something far more fundamental: the invisible programming that controls your relationship with money, wealth, and what you believe you deserve. The discovery of financial set points. The concept of a wealth thermostat isn't metaphorical. It's based on decades of research into what psychologists call financial set points, the unconscious beliefs about money that function exactly like a biological thermostat. Dr. Brad Klontz, a financial psychologist at Creighton University, has spent 20 years studying what he calls money scripts, the unconscious beliefs about money that drive our financial behavior. His research reveals something remarkable. Most people have an internal financial comfort zone, and they unconsciously work to stay within it. When we earn above our set point, we feel anxiety. When we earn below it, we feel motivated to get back up. But here's what's fascinating. The anxiety we feel from earning too much is often stronger than the motivation we feel from earning too little. Think about that for a moment. Your brain is more committed to keeping you from having too much money than it is to keeping you from having too little. This isn't laziness or lack of ambition. This is your survival system working exactly as designed. The research shows that our financial set point is typically established by age 7, sometimes earlier. It's formed through a combination of direct messages about money, observed behavior from caregivers, and emotional associations we make between money and safety. Consider the famous study of lottery winners conducted by Philip Brickman at Northwestern University. Brickman followed lottery winners for years after their windfall and found something that shocked the research community. Within 3 to 5 years, Most lottery winners had returned to approximately the same financial position they'd held before winning. This wasn't because they were financially irresponsible, though that was often the surface explanation. It was because their wealth thermostat was still set to their original temperature. The sudden influx of money triggered every internal alarm system they had. Their unconscious mind interpreted wealth as danger. And so it did what unconscious minds do. It found ways to return to safety. Expensive purchases that seemed reasonable at the time. Investments that somehow went wrong. Generosity that crossed the line into enabling. Friends and family members who suddenly needed help. The lottery winners weren't making bad decisions. They were making perfectly logical decisions based on their internal programming about what level of wealth was safe for someone like them. Dr. Thomas Stanley, who spent decades studying millionaires for his book The Millionaire Next Door, discovered the inverse pattern. He found that people who successfully build and maintain wealth have what he called wealth-building personalities, but these aren't personality traits in the traditional sense. They're people whose wealth thermostat was set to a higher temperature early in life. They feel comfortable with abundance because their young minds learned that having money was normal, safe, and expected for people like them. Stanley's research revealed that children who grow up in households where wealth building is discussed positively, where financial success is celebrated rather than feared, and where money is seen as a tool rather than a source of stress, develop wealth thermostats calibrated to abundance. But here's what's crucial to understand. Your current financial situation has almost nothing to do with your intelligence, your work ethic, your education, or even your opportunities. It has everything to do with the temperature your wealth thermostat was set to before you were old enough to consciously choose it. The neuroscience of financial comfort zones. To understand why your wealth thermostat is so powerful, we need to look at what's happening in your brain when you think about money. Neuroscientist Dr. Mauricio Delgado at Rutgers University has used fMRI brain scans to study how people respond to financial decisions, and his findings reveal why changing your relationship with money is so challenging. When you're operating within your financial comfort zone, earning, spending, and saving at levels that feel familiar, your brain shows activity in the prefrontal cortex, the region associated with rational decision-making. You feel calm, in control, and capable of making good choices. But when financial situations push you outside your comfort zone, whether that's earning significantly more or less than usual, your brain shows increased activity in the amygdala, the fear center. Your body releases stress hormones. Your decision-making shifts from rational to reactive. This is why people often make their worst financial decisions precisely when the stakes are highest. The promotion that comes with a significant raise triggers anxiety rather than celebration. The unexpected windfall creates a need to spend it quickly. The financial emergency leads to choices that seem to make the situation worse. Dr. Delgado's research shows that our brains literally interpret unfamiliar financial situations as threats to survival. And when your brain perceives a threat, it has one primary objective: return to safety as quickly as possible. This explains a phenomenon that financial advisors see constantly but rarely understand. A client receives a substantial raise, and within 6 months, their expenses have mysteriously increased to match their new income. They're not being frivolous. Their brain is working to restore financial equilibrium. The unconscious mind uses what psychologists call lifestyle inflation to bring you back to your set point. But it's not really about lifestyle. It's about maintaining the level of financial stress your brain has learned to associate with normal. Consider Maria, a marketing manager who received a promotion that doubled her salary from $50,000 to $100,000. She was thrilled initially. She moved to a better apartment, bought a reliable car, and started eating at nicer restaurants. But 6 months later, Maria found herself lying awake at night, worried about money in ways she hadn't experienced when earning half as much. Her new expenses had grown to match her new income, but more than that, she felt like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. The stress wasn't coming from her financial situation, which was objectively much better. It was coming from the gap between her new reality and her internal sense of what was normal for someone like her. Maria's brain was sending her a clear message: this level of abundance isn't safe. People like us don't live like this. Something bad is going to happen if we don't get back to familiar ground. And so Maria's unconscious mind began making subtle adjustments. She became more generous with friends and family. She made a few investment decisions that didn't work out. She developed a taste for expensive hobbies. Not because she was irresponsible, but because her wealth thermostat was working to restore her to the financial temperature it recognized as safe. Dr. Daniel Kahneman's research on loss aversion provides another piece of this puzzle. Kahneman found that people feel the pain of losing money approximately twice as intensely as they feel the pleasure of gaining the same amount. But his research also revealed something more subtle. People feel discomfort from having too much money relative to their internal expectations. This is why windfalls often feel uncomfortable rather than purely joyful. Your brain interprets unexpected wealth as a deviation from normal that needs to be corrected. The discomfort you feel isn't about the money itself. It's about being outside your programmed comfort zone. Identity, economics, who you think you are determines what you have. The most powerful force shaping your wealth thermostat isn't your beliefs about money, it's your beliefs about yourself. Economists George Akerlof and Rachel Cranton introduced the concept of identity economics, which explains how our sense of who we are drives our economic behavior in ways we rarely recognize. Your financial identity was formed through thousands of small interactions and observations during your formative years. Every time you heard, "We can't afford that," every time you witnessed stress around money, every time you absorbed messages about what kind of people have wealth and what kind don't, your brain was building a model of financial reality. But more importantly, it was building a model of where you fit in that reality. Dr. Keith Payne at the University of North Carolina has studied what he calls the broken ladder effect, how our perception of our place in the economic hierarchy affects our financial behavior. His research shows that people make financial decisions based not on their absolute wealth, but on where they believe they rank relative to others. Payne's studies reveal that people who see themselves as lower on the economic ladder make more impulsive financial decisions, even when their actual income is substantial. Conversely, people who see themselves as higher on the ladder make more long-term financial decisions, even when their income is modest. The key insight is that your financial behavior is driven by your identity, not your circumstances. Consider two people earning identical salaries of $75,000 per year. Jennifer grew up in a family where her parents were teachers who struggled to make ends meet. Her identity is someone who works hard for money and needs to be careful. David grew up in a family where his parents were entrepreneurs who talked about money as a tool for creating opportunities. His identity is someone who uses money to build wealth. Despite identical incomes, Jennifer and David will make completely different financial choices. Jennifer will prioritize security and saving. She'll feel guilty about spending money on herself. She'll be suspicious of investment opportunities that promise high returns. Her wealth thermostat is set to just enough. David will prioritize growth and opportunity. He'll invest in himself and his future. He'll be comfortable with calculated risks. He'll see money as something that should work for him. His wealth thermostat is set to abundance. Neither approach is right or wrong, but they lead to dramatically different financial outcomes over time. And the crucial point is that these differences have nothing to do with financial knowledge or intelligence. They're entirely about identity. Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky's research at UC Riverside reveals how deeply our sense of identity affects our relationship with money. In her studies of people who experience sudden wealth through inheritance, business success, or windfalls, she found that those who maintained their wealth long-term had one thing in common. They already saw themselves as the kind of person who deserved wealth. Those who lost their wealth quickly had a different common thread. They continued to see themselves as the kind of person who doesn't have money. The wealth felt foreign, temporary, like something that belonged to someone else. This is why traditional financial advice often fails. Telling someone to pay yourself first or invest for the long term assumes that their identity supports wealth-building behavior. But if someone's core identity is, "I'm not the kind of person who has money," then wealth-building activities will feel inauthentic and unsustainable. The identity behavior loop works like this. Your identity determines your actions create your results, and your results reinforce your identity. If you see yourself as someone who struggles with money, you'll take actions consistent with that identity, which will create results that confirm your belief about yourself. Breaking this loop requires changing the identity first, not the behavior. Dr. James Clear, in his research on habit formation, found that the most sustainable behavioral changes come from identity shifts rather than outcome goals. People who successfully transform their finances don't just change what they do, they change who they believe they are. Instead of saying, "I want to save more money," they say, "I am someone who builds wealth." Instead of "I should invest," they say, "I am an investor." The subtle shift from behavior-focused goals to identity-focused goals changes everything. When your actions align with your identity, they feel natural and sustainable. When they conflict with your identity, they feel forced and temporary. The invisible hand of self-sabotage. Perhaps the most painful aspect of the wealth thermostat is how it creates self-sabotage patterns that feel completely beyond our control. Dr. Gay Hendricks, in his research on what he calls upper limit problems, has identified the specific ways people unconsciously undermine their own financial success. Self-sabotage isn't a character flaw or a lack of willpower. It's your internal thermostat working exactly as designed, protecting you from what it perceives as the danger of having too much. The research shows that financial self-sabotage typically follows predictable patterns. Dr. Hendricks identified what he calls the zone of genius, the level of success that feels natural and sustainable for each person. When we operate within this zone, we feel confident and capable. But when we exceed it, we unconsciously create problems to bring ourselves back down. These problems don't feel like self-sabotage in the moment. They feel like bad luck, poor timing, or external circumstances beyond our control. But when you look at the pattern over time, the invisible hand becomes visible. Consider Robert, a software developer who has an unusual relationship with money. Every time his bank account reaches around $15,000, something happens. His car needs major repairs. He has a medical emergency. He makes an investment that goes wrong. He helps a family member with an unexpected expense. Robert genuinely believes these are coincidences. He sees himself as someone who's always dealing with financial emergencies. But his pattern reveals something different. His wealth thermostat is set to approximately $10,000, and his unconscious mind creates problems whenever he exceeds that amount by too much. Dr. Hendricks' research shows that these upper limit problems serve a specific psychological function. They allow us to maintain our identity while explaining why we don't have more. "I would have money if it weren't for all these emergencies" is more comfortable than "I'm not the kind of person who has money." The self-sabotage patterns Dr. Hendricks identified include deflection, suddenly becoming focused on other people's problems when your own success starts to feel uncomfortable. The successful business owner who becomes obsessed with helping struggling friends instead of growing their business further. Squandering, making purchases or investments that seem reasonable in the moment, but consistently erode wealth over time. The pattern of buying things you don't really need whenever your savings account gets too high. Loyalty conflicts, feeling guilty about surpassing friends, family members, or colleagues financially. The unconscious belief that having more means taking something away from others. And the most subtle form, success depression, the unexpected sadness or anxiety that comes with achieving financial goals. Your conscious mind wanted the success, but your unconscious mind interprets it as moving away from your tribe, your roots, your authentic self. Dr. Tim Kasser's research at Knox College provides insight into why success can feel depressing. Kasser found that people who achieve financial goals that conflict with their core values or identity experience decreased well-being, even when their circumstances have objectively improved. This explains why some people feel empty or anxious after reaching financial milestones they worked years to achieve. The success itself isn't the problem. It's the internal conflict between who they've become and who they believe they're supposed to be. The most insidious aspect of financial self-sabotage is that it's often invisible to the person experiencing it. Dr. Hendricks found that people typically have blind spots around their own upper limit problems. They can see the pattern in others but not in themselves. This is because acknowledging self-sabotage requires admitting that we have more control over our financial situation than we're comfortable accepting. It's easier to believe that external circumstances are holding us back than to recognize that we might be holding ourselves back. But here's what's hopeful about understanding self-sabotage. Once you can see the pattern, you can begin to change it. The unconscious becomes conscious. The invisible becomes visible. And what was once an automatic response becomes a choice. The generational transmission of financial patterns. Your wealth thermostat wasn't set in isolation. It's part of a generational chain of financial programming that extends back through your family line in ways you've probably never considered. Dr. Brad Clontze's research on financial genograms reveals how money patterns are passed down through families, like genetic traits, often skipping generations and appearing in unexpected ways. A financial genogram is like a family tree, but instead of tracking physical characteristics, it tracks financial behaviors, beliefs, and traumas. When Dr. Klontz has clients create these maps, they often discover that their seemingly personal financial struggles are actually part of larger family patterns that have been playing out for decades. The research shows that financial trauma can be transmitted across generations through what psychologists call epigenetic inheritance. This isn't just about learning behaviors by observation. It's about inheriting the biological stress responses that accompany financial insecurity. Dr. Rachel Yehuda's groundbreaking research on Holocaust survivors found that trauma can literally change gene expression in ways that are passed to children and grandchildren. People who never experienced the original trauma can still carry its biological signature, including heightened stress responses to situations that remind the system of the original threat. The same mechanism applies to financial trauma. Children and grandchildren of people who experienced the Great Depression, for example, often carry an inexplicable anxiety around spending money, even when they have never experienced financial hardship themselves. Consider the story of Margaret, a successful attorney whose grandmother lived through the Great Depression. Margaret has never experienced financial insecurity, but she feels physically anxious when spending money on anything beyond basic necessities. She clips coupons despite earning a six-figure income. She buys generic brands even when she prefers name brands. She feels guilty about financial success in ways that don't match her actual life experience. Margaret's wealth thermostat was influenced not just by her own childhood experiences, but by the financial trauma carried in her family system. Her grandmother's survival strategies became embedded in the family's relationship with money, passed down through subtle messages, emotional reactions, and unconscious behaviors. Dr. Clonce's research identifies several common generational financial patterns. The scarcity legacy. Families where each generation struggles with never having enough, regardless of actual income levels. The belief that there isn't enough to go around becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that shapes financial behavior across generations. The wealth guilt pattern. Families where financial success is unconsciously associated with betrayal or abandonment of family values. Children in these families often sabotage their own success to maintain connection with their roots. The money avoidance cycle. Families where money is seen as the root of evil or corruption. Each generation unconsciously avoids wealth to maintain moral purity, creating a cycle of financial struggle that feels virtuous rather than problematic. And the boom-bust legacy. Families with patterns of dramatic financial swings, where wealth is gained and lost repeatedly across generations. Children learn that money is temporary and unpredictable, leading to either excessive risk-taking or extreme conservatism. The most powerful aspect of generational financial patterns is that they often operate below the level of conscious awareness. Family members don't sit down and explicitly teach these patterns. They're transmitted through emotional reactions, casual comments, and the thousand small ways that families communicate what's normal and what's dangerous. Dr. Bowen's family systems theory explains how these patterns perpetuate themselves. In family systems, there's an unconscious pressure to maintain homeostasis, to keep things the way they've always been. When one family member begins to change their financial patterns, the system often responds with anxiety and pressure to return to familiar patterns. This is why people sometimes experience relationship difficulties when they begin to improve their financial situation. It's not that their family members don't want them to succeed. It's that the family system is responding to what it perceives as a threat to stability. Understanding generational patterns doesn't mean blaming your family or feeling trapped by your history. It means recognizing that your financial challenges may not be personal failings. They may be inherited patterns that you can transform. The research shows that when someone consciously works to change generational financial patterns, the effects ripple both backward and forward through the family system. Children learn new patterns by observation. And sometimes, even adult family members begin to question their own financial assumptions when they see someone close to them operating from a different paradigm. Recalibrating your wealth thermostat. The question that emerges from understanding your wealth thermostat is both simple and profound. Can it be changed? The research provides a cautiously optimistic answer. Yes, but not in the ways most people expect. Traditional approaches to changing financial behavior focus on the conscious mind, budgeting, goal setting, financial education. These approaches can be helpful, but they often fail because they're trying to override unconscious programming with conscious willpower. It's like trying to change the temperature in your house by arguing with a thermostat. Dr. Bruce Lipton's research on neuroplasticity reveals that the unconscious mind processes information at a rate of approximately 20 million bits per second, while the conscious mind processes about 40 bits per second. This means that in any conflict between conscious intention and unconscious programming, the unconscious wins by a factor of about 500,000 to 1. This is why willpower-based approaches to financial change are so exhausting and unsustainable. You're not fighting your lack of discipline. You're fighting the full processing power of your unconscious mind. But Dr. Lipton's research also reveals something hopeful. The unconscious mind can be reprogrammed, but it requires working with its natural learning mechanisms rather than against them. The unconscious mind learns through repetition, emotion, and states of relaxed focus. This is why the most effective approaches to changing your wealth thermostat involve practices that engage these natural learning states. Dr. Joe Dispenza's research on meditation and neuroplasticity shows that specific types of meditation can literally rewire the brain's response to money and abundance. When people practice visualizing themselves as wealthy in a relaxed, meditative state, their brains begin to form new neural pathways that support wealth-building behavior. The key is that this visualization must be done in a state of elevated emotion and deep relaxation, the same state the brain was in when the original programming was installed. Dr. Dispenza found that people who practiced this type of meditation for just 20 minutes a day for 8 weeks showed measurable changes in brain structure, particularly in areas associated with self-worth and future planning. But perhaps more importantly, they began making different financial decisions without consciously trying to change their behavior. Their wealth thermostat had been recalibrated at the unconscious level. Another approach that shows promise in the research is what Dr. Hendricks calls appreciating your upper limits. Instead of fighting against self-sabotage patterns, this approach involves recognizing them as protective mechanisms that served a purpose at one time. When you can appreciate that your wealth thermostat was originally set to keep you safe, you can begin to dialogue with it rather than override it. You can acknowledge its concerns while gradually expanding its definition of what's safe. Dr. Kristin Neff's research on self-compassion reveals why this approach is more effective than self-criticism. When people approach their financial patterns with curiosity and kindness rather than judgment, they're more likely to create lasting change. The process of recalibrating your wealth thermostat typically involves several stages. First, awareness, recognizing your current set point and the patterns that maintain it. This often involves tracking not just your financial behavior, but your emotional responses to different levels of wealth. Second, understanding, exploring where your current programming came from without judgment. This might involve examining family patterns, childhood messages, or traumatic experiences around money. Third, appreciation, acknowledging that your current patterns served a protective function and honoring the part of you that created them. Fourth, expansion, gradually exposing yourself to higher levels of wealth in safe, controlled ways while practicing new emotional responses. And finally, integration, allowing your new wealth thermostat to stabilize at a higher setting through consistent practice and reinforcement. Dr. Maxwell Maltz's research on self-image psychology suggests that this process typically takes about 21 to 66 days, depending on how deeply ingrained the original patterns are. The key is consistency rather than intensity. Small, daily practices are more effective than dramatic but sporadic efforts. One of the most powerful techniques that emerges from the research is what Dr. Neville Goddard called living in the end, the practice of consistently imagining yourself as already having achieved your desired financial situation, not as a future goal, but as a present reality. When this is done in a relaxed state with genuine feeling, the unconscious mind begins to accept this new reality as true. And once the unconscious accepts a new financial identity, it automatically begins creating circumstances that match that identity. The research shows that people who successfully recalibrate their wealth thermostat don't just change their financial situation, they change their entire relationship with abundance, worthiness, and what's possible for their lives. Summary: the temperature of your financial future. We began this exploration with Sarah, the 7-year-old girl at a kitchen table, learning that people like her don't have extra money. We've journeyed through the neuroscience of financial comfort zones, the psychology of identity economics, the patterns of self-sabotage, and the generational transmission of money patterns. What emerges from this research is a picture of human financial behavior that's both sobering and hopeful. Sobering because it reveals how little of our financial life is under conscious control. Hopeful because it shows that what feels like personal failure is often just unconscious programming that can be changed. Your wealth thermostat was set by a child who was doing their best to understand the rules of survival in the world they found themselves in. That child made the best decisions they could with the information they had. They created patterns that were designed to keep you safe. But the safety that served you then might be limiting you now. The financial temperature that felt appropriate for a 7-year-old might not serve the adult you've become. The research we've explored reveals several key insights. Your financial behavior is driven by unconscious programming established in childhood, not by conscious decisions or willpower. This programming functions like a thermostat, automatically working to maintain a specific financial temperature regardless of external circumstances. Self-sabotage isn't a character flaw. It's your internal thermostat protecting you from what it perceives as the danger of having too much. Financial patterns are often generational, passed down through families in ways that operate below conscious awareness. And most hopefully, your wealth thermostat can be recalibrated, but it requires working with your unconscious mind rather than against it. The path forward isn't about forcing yourself to think differently about money. It's about gently reprogramming the unconscious patterns that drive your financial behavior. This happens through practices that engage your brain's natural learning mechanisms: repetition, emotion, and relaxed focus. It happens through appreciating your current patterns rather than fighting them. It happens through gradually expanding your comfort zone rather than trying to leap outside it. Most importantly, it happens through recognizing that your financial situation isn't a reflection of your worth, your intelligence, or your character. It's simply a reflection of the temperature your wealth thermostat was set to before you were old enough to consciously choose it. Dr. Sarah Chen, the surgeon we met at the beginning, eventually discovered her wealth thermostat through therapy. She learned to appreciate the 7-year-old who decided that financial security meant having just enough. She gradually practiced feeling safe with higher levels of wealth. She reprogrammed her unconscious associations with money and abundance. Today, Dr. Chen has over $2 million in investments. She drives a car she enjoys. She takes vacations without guilt. She donates generously to causes she cares about. Not because she forced herself to change, but because she recalibrated her internal thermostat to a temperature that matches her adult capabilities and values. Your wealth thermostat is not your destiny. It's simply your starting point. Understanding it is the first step toward changing it. And changing it is the first step toward creating a financial life that truly serves who you're becoming rather than who you once were. The temperature is up to you. Otro, as we close this exploration of the wealth thermostat, remember that awareness itself is the beginning of transformation. Simply understanding why you make the financial decisions you do creates space for new choices. Your unconscious mind has been listening to every word of this discussion, absorbing insights that will continue to work below the level of conscious awareness. The process of recalibrating your wealth thermostat has already begun. Trust in your mind's natural ability to integrate new patterns. Trust in your worthiness to experience financial abundance. And trust in the possibility that your relationship with money can be different than it's been before. The gentle frequencies embedded in this audio will continue their work long after the words have ended, quietly supporting your unconscious mind in creating new neural pathways around wealth and abundance. Allow this process to unfold naturally. Your wealth thermostat has been protecting you for years. Honor that protection while gently expanding what it considers safe. The temperature of your financial future is being reset, 1 degree at a time.